for me and for many bisexual women, it's like, on the one hand, we're like hyper visible through the male gaze in this really sexualized sort of reductive way. And then on the other hand, just really invisible as like real identities.
Yeah.
And so I went through this part of my life where I was like, well, it's an open secret, people know, but I'm just not going to talk about it. And then when the Pulse massacre happened, it really radicalized me.
Yeah.
And I started thinking about why is this important to me, and why do I care if people know this about me? And I became a lot more vocal. Sometimes I say I became militantly bisexual.
It's the best way to be bisexual, isn't it?
Hi, my name's Leo WT, and you have found your way to the Conversations podcast. Conversations exist to create spiritually minded conversations about life. We desire to create safe space for dialogue and community. We desire to come together regularly and intentionally to generate conversations about life, belief, and the intersection of the two. Everyone is welcome at the conversation.
All right, friends, we are here and we are queer, and it is Pride Month, and we're talking about all of the gay things, all of the queer things, all of the intersectional and non-binary things today with my lovely friend, Elle Dowd, who is, in fact, hella queer.
Hella queer. Hello. Good to be back.
For those of you who may not have seen it, you'll want to go back and check out the episode that Elle and I did talking about purity culture and how the church has kind of almost bastardized sexuality and really tried to hem in something that wasn't meant to be hem in. It was a dope conversation. I'm not gonna lie to you. I fell a little bit in love with Elle during that conversation, which is just funny to say because my wife's name is also Elle. So like it's maybe a thing for me, but
yeah. Like a type, but just like a name.
Just like a name, yeah, but like a disembodied name, you know what I mean? So as I mentioned, there are two things I want to highlight. It is in fact Pride Month. Yay, Pride. Happy Pride, right? Thank you to the Black and brown and trans women that brought Pride into existence. We must give that sort of land acknowledgement before we start, right? But also I invited Elle on, and I actually have another friend that might pop on here soon. We'll see what happens. But I wanted to talk to Elle because I'm in this space personally, like you're my therapist right now, Elle, but I am in this space personally where for the first time in my life, I'm not visibly queer, because even when I was a kid, everybody knew I was a lesbian, but I didn't know. And so really for the first time in my life, I mean, until I fucking talk or walk in with a crop top, you know, full disclosure, but people tend to assume that I am a straight male, and they tend to assume my partner is a straight female, and that is the furthest thing from the truth. And so I brought Elle on to chat about this because she also deals with this in her own way. So do you want to give us a little bit of an introduction to kind of where you come into this conversation?
Sure. Yeah. My name's Elle. I use pronouns like she, her, and hers, and I'm bisexual. So I actually grew up maybe kind of similar to like it took you, Leo, a second to have like those moments of self-discovery, but I sort of thought that everyone felt the way that I did and we just weren't talking about it, that everyone, you know, kissed their girlfriends and everybody had crushes on girls as well as boys, but it was just something we didn't talk about. And it wasn't until later that I was able to recognize that that wasn't true. And then of course, after I recognized that wasn't true, there was some of the internalized biphobia and some of the shame and having to work through that a little bit. And I really was able to work through that because of the love that I received from the queer community and kind of helped cure me of my internalized biphobia, at least mostly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I ended up getting married to a man. His name's Adam. He's awesome. He's the best. If you've seen that TikTok trend, he definitely has bi wife energy, even though we don't use the word wife for me. I don't resonate with that. Like we use like spouse or partner, but yeah. So sometimes people ask me, you know, if you married this man, why is it that you won't shut up about being bisexual?
Cause I am, bitch.
Right, because I am. And what I usually say is, you know, I had this whole life of experiences that formed who I was, right? I kind of grew up feeling confused, feeling alone, feeling isolated, hating myself, praying for God to change me. A lot of the things that many of us in the LGBTQI plus community have experienced.
Yep.
And those experiences really formed me. It really affected the way I do friendships, the way I view family, the way I parent. It affected my worldview. It affected my politics. It affected my sex life. It really did. You know, we're not sort of compartmentalized people. We don't just leave a part of us on the shelf. These experiences really affected everything of who I am. And so getting married also affected who I am, but it didn't change all those experiences. And I bring my queerness with me into my marriage and into the rest of my life too.
Yes, that's so important, especially when it comes to queerness, because it's something that happens at the seed of our being. And I'm kind of beyond this space of needing to have a biological mandate. Like, I don't feel the need for a biological mandate anymore, but I do feel the need to acknowledge that it is a fundamental part of who I am. It is at the seat of my being, by choice or by biology. I am queer.
Yes.
And like you said, that is one of the things that informs our whole worldview. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You cannot separate yourself from your context. And for queer people, we are queer whether you think we are or not, you know?
Yes, absolutely.
What are some of the things that you get said the most to you that just kind of really like trigger you or frustrate you? Because I know a lot of people who are watching this are probably thinking in a still very binary setting of queer, or, you know, probably using the word gay still, like gay or straight, right? But folks like you and I have come to understand that the world has much more nuance, right? So talk to me a little bit about things that you hear, things that you've gone through, and why you feel the need to categorically disavow this appearance of being straight.
Yeah, you know, like many people, I kind of went through stages in my self-discovery and coming out. I sort of first was like, I'm not straight. And then I was like really not able to use the word bisexual for myself because of my internalized biphobia. And so I was like, oh, I don't know, maybe I'm like lesbian with exceptions, which is bisexual, you know,
Right.
but I
known
had
as
all these
bisexual.
horrible, right. Like I had all these horrible internalized, I don't know, stereotypes about bisexuality not being valid, right? And especially when I was growing up, bisexuality for women was mostly like a thing that was in porn, not like mainstream like gross porn, right? Like not like a thing
not like that queer feminist affirming porn. No,
right.
no, the shit.
Right, like the stuff that was like just definitely filtered through the male gaze. And so for me and for many bisexual women, it's like on the one hand, we're like hyper visible through the male gaze in this really sexualized sort of reductive way. And then on the other hand, just really invisible as like real identities. And so I went through this part of my life where I was like, well, it's an open secret. People know, but I'm just not going to talk about it. And then when the Pulse massacre happened, it really radicalized me. And I started thinking about why is this important to me? And why do I care if people know this about me? And I became a lot more vocal. Sometimes I say I became militantly bisexual.
It's the best way to be bisexual, isn't it?
The militant way. Yeah. So if you're going to be militant about something, it's kind of like, I'm also like super anti, you know, nationalism and like flags in general, but I get like pumped about our flags. So I don't know. It's the only country I swear allegiance to. Just kidding. But yes. But so I think some of the maybe assumptions that people have had that have really hurt me. I expect it when it comes from straight people. Straight people frequently universalize their experiences like many people in sort of like dominant social groups do. But it really, really does hurt me the few times that it's been from other people in our communities. So I remember when I was first coming out, and I came out to, I was in a lesbian studies class, which is very funny, but it was a great class. And I came out to the class, and overall my coming out experience was just so wonderful. My professor was so supportive, so amazing. But there was this one white cis gay man who like insisted on calling me straight. Like he would frequently refer to me as straight. And so it was not only enough for me to have to come out to myself, to the class, to sort of like deal with what that means for me, but I was coming out over and over to the same person. And it really felt like very violent. It felt like being really shoved back in the closet. And there's definitely, we can talk about this, Leo, about like passing privilege and stuff, which is definitely a thing. And at the same time, we sort of acknowledge, those of us who have been in the closet, acknowledge that while the closet is like maybe the best situation for a time because of safety, that it kind of can be pretty soul sucking. Like the closet isn't the dream. And so to be kind of shoved back in can be really, really harmful. So that's probably an experience that I would point to. What about you?
I had a very similar situation happen. I was on testosterone. I'd probably been on maybe a year, maybe a little less. I had just a little bit of chin hair, not anything close to a beard.
This
literally
epic beard.
I know, it's so sexy. I use so much Olaplex on my beard, which is like, if you know how much Olaplex costs, it's ridiculous.
I do, yes.
But it's gorgeous. But I just had a couple chin hairs, like me and Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. We had the same beard at this time. But I went to Pride and I was there with my then fiance, now wife, and then my friend Aubrey. Both of them are very femme lesbians. And so it was just such an icky experience, to be honest, because I was literally at the Pride Parade wearing a rainbow headband and someone's like, what the fuck are you even doing here? And I was like, whoa. And then why, what are you saying about me? Like, first of all, do you think I'm like a straight man? And then someone walked past and was like, bitch has a fucking beard. And I was like, oh my God, like I can't, this is supposed to be my community. Like this is my space. And I had these people like coming at me in it. And it's just so frustrating because I think for folks like you and I who also retain and will not let go of our religious identity and our spiritual identity, we have to fight for validation all the time in the spiritual world. Pride should be the last place where we have to fight for validation. And all of those things are innately spiritual. They are a part of who we are inside. And we're kind of getting it from all angles. We're getting disavowed from all angles. And that's just not okay. I mean, it's not.
It reminds me a lot of, obviously this is not the same thing, right? So I'm not trying to draw sort of false parallels, but it reminds me also of how, Pride is supposed to be an anti-police uprising, like an uprising that is like rooted in liberation from state violence. And yet so often, particularly those of us who are white LGBTQI plus people, not only like screw this up around Pride, but like in general, just have a real lack of solidarity for our Black and brown siblings. We're not paying attention to our, Black trans sisters who are being killed and then misgendered in the news. We're not paying attention to the undocumented trans women who die at the border, like all of these different ways that we just really fail in our solidarity and on so many different levels. And it's just like an extra layer of betrayal.
Yes, it is, because it's coming, the call is coming from inside the house, so to speak. You know what I mean? And that's just incredibly unfortunate, because let me state this in no uncertain terms. Now, this is not for you. This is for anyone else who's trying to watch, because I'm sure you know this. But your identity is your identity, no matter who you sleep with, marry, or are attracted to. Your identity is valid, because people need to understand that for a lot of times, there are a lot of gay men and lesbians who are married to opposite gender, opposite biological sex partners, because that was the option, because they wanted to have kids, because they are on some level bisexual or pansexual. There is a million reasons why someone could be in a straight passing relationship, but that doesn't make them straight. And I would love to talk about passing privilege with you, because that's something that comes up very heavily for me as a trans person who is passing as male, because I make no mistake, I am not a male. Like I am very much of two spirits in that aspect, right? Of male and female. I am not a male. And so the fact that I just happen to look male, I'm gonna need people to challenge their understanding of what it means to be male.
Yeah. I think, and actually, as I've been reflecting on passing privilege, which is something that I think about a lot, right? Is how tied that even, bisexual passing privilege is to gender. Because the reason I pass is, yes, because of my partner, But not only because of my partner, because my partner is not always around. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember I was, at a patio one time, and some stranger was like asking me for directions, and I think to the gay bar, and this has been years now. And I said, oh, it's over there or whatever. And, it came out that I was queer, and they're like, well, you don't look queer.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, cool,
You're like,
I am.
thanks a lot, fuckers.
Right. I am. And what they're really trying to say is that they had, a preconceived notion of what it means to be queer or LGBTQI plus in general. Just like they're picturing, unless I'm like Ellen DeGeneres or something, then I can't possibly be queer. And so the sort of bisexual passing privilege goes along with kind of the femme erasure and invisibility.
Yes.
But so I want to make sure that we say hi.
I was just going to say, speaking of femme invisibility, you folks might have noticed that we've got a new friend on screen. For me, she's right down here. This is my friend, and I'm going to let her introduce herself real quick, and we'll jump right back into where we are because this is perfect.
Great. Well, first, I'm sorry I'm like a weird ghost person. And usually our Zoom is like set up for afternoon light. And I sat down and I was like, oh boy, well, guess this is what this is going to look like.
I guess this is what we're doing right now.
Guess this is what we're doing. I can try to mess with it, but probably that will just create more problems.
I fixed that by recording in a windowless cave. So,
that's an idea. I could try jumping up and like closing a window.
Don't even worry about it.
If it gets too weird for me to be like whitewashed into oblivion here.
Yeah.
But hi. So thanks so much for having me. My name's Lupine. I am a cis bi woman, I think is probably the number of descriptors that I tend to use. She, her.
All right.
And I'm really excited to be here and talking about this. Yeah,
absolutely. For those of you who may not have met Lupine before, I want to throw in there that she's an actress and a thinker and kind of a free range mama. And I really like the thoughts that she brings into my salon chair. And so I just decided like, I'm gonna rope you right into this video. And the reason that I asked both Elle and Lupine is because I know that you guys are both cisgendered and you are in relationships with people of the opposite gender, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like it's very important, especially for Pride Month, that we do not exclude and that we do not build false binaries because your queerness is valid. And I wanted to bring you both on, especially as femme queer bi women. You know what I mean? So Lulu, not Lulu. Wow.
Lulu's fine.
You go by,
Lulu's
okay.
Fine. Yeah, all of it.
I have another friend who goes by Lulu and I just like jumped right into that nickname there.
No,
Whoa.
it's a sweet one. I like it.
We were just talking about passing privilege and just like femme erasure. And I would love for you to just like drop a couple of thoughts on that because I know that's something that you deal with.
Yeah, sure. So I've been married to a man, to a cis male presenting guy for 13 years.
Okay.
And I know that trying to think, I should have put these together more when I was trying to set up my computer.
You're all good.
Okay. So I find myself thinking about, and actually I was thinking about it all day today, like, so how do I perform my queerness here? Right. Like, how do I prove that I am queer enough to belong in this space? And I feel like that's something that I'm navigating a lot. But I got married when I was 21. So before a lot of the time to a guy, got married to a man when I was 21. And so like I had been, whatever to stuff when I was younger, but really as far as like big pride parties, stuff like that, right? That a lot of people are getting to do when you're in your 20s. I was a young mom for a little while.
Right.
And then I was like, well, here I am and I look like this and I present myself this way.
Right.
And I'm married to this guy. And so what does it mean if I show up in a queer space, especially during Pride. And
Yeah.
and so then I wind up thinking about, well, okay, so how do I perform my sexuality
Right.
in a way?
And like,
then
how do you
that-
pass? And I think that's a big problem when it comes to passing, is the idea that there's an arbitrary standard that we have to meet. For
Right.
those of you who are watching who may or may not be queer and haven't heard the term of passing privilege, I recognize that being queer doesn't come with an automatic manual or dictionary. So I'm going to take just a brief pause to explain passing privilege. Passing privilege is the idea that the world perceives your gender and identity as you want them to perceive it, right? And so sometimes that means going by societal standards. So for a trans person, there's an idea that you can pass, right? So I'm assigned female at birth, but I meet some arbitrary threshold that makes me pass as a male. But the violence that does to queerness is that being a male is whatever the fuck a male does. And so there's an arbitrary idea that we need to, like Kelly said, or like Lupine said, perform our queerness or engage, like queerness activate. And that does violence to queer people everywhere who don't have the money for surgery, who don't want to conform to a binary, or who love different genders of people, right? Throughout the course of their life. And so passing privilege, while it's it's not anymore for me, but it used to be comforting when people said, oh, I wouldn't know that you were assigned female at birth. And now I'm like, hashtag, that's not the point. Because I didn't want you to assume anything. I wanted you to know me. So that's kind of what we're talking about for those of you who might be curious about the term passing privilege. Hopefully I did that description justice. If you folks have anything to add, please feel free.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think, so for me, right, I think about with passing privilege, some of the like rights or privileges or power that I have access to because of my proximity to this societal norm, right? Like I'm not queer, or I'm not straight, I'm queer. But there's, because of heterosexism and the way that is sort of the norm, there's these assumptions which do damage to me and harm me. And we'll talk a little bit about that too, I know, but they also offer me this sort of weird, gross access to power and privilege. So some of that would be like, I could marry my spouse before 2015 and it was like not a big deal.
Yeah.
I could adopt my kids. It was not a big deal, right? I can walk down the street and hold hands with my partner. No one is leaning out the door of their car or truck to like scream things at me, right? And if people are screaming things at me on the street, it's more like the cat calling street harassment that comes from being a femme and less like, queer antagonistic slurs. And so I think it's always really important. I think it's really good for those of us who quote unquote can pass, right? Who society assumes and erases. And so then we have these sort of privileges. I think it's really important to acknowledge those privileges. As at the same time as we're sort of making space for the damage that does to all queer people and to us in particular. Bisexual women have very high rates of things like PTSD, mental and physical health issues, because we have higher rates of intimate partner violence and higher rates of police brutality and all kinds of things, even when compared to monosexual gay men and lesbians, right? So there are these, I don't want to at all downplay the privileges, right, of being able to just like marry Adam and nobody was like making my marriage into a social issue. No Supreme Court was ruling in on its validity. And at the same time, there are these kind of like sneaky ways that still biphobia, heterosexism, this is heteropatriarchy, still find ways to hurt queer people like us.
Something I could add to that as far as moving in the world with passing privilege too is having been pregnant in the world twice with a male partner. I mean, the things that if you do not present as anything other than and I would also say like a younger woman and, all kinds of like the right kind of pregnant person.
Yes.
The things that people will say, horrifying.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point that I hadn't thought about because I've never been a pregnant person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's so many systems and layers at play with that too. And did you find yourself at all just feeling buried under those systems and assumptions?
Oh, yes. All the time.
Yeah.
It's it's just tiring to constantly feel like you have to assert your existence in any given place. And I think being bisexual, and I think also for me figuring out what bisexuality meant to me when I was still really like coming of age, but I was already married to a guy, right? And so figuring out, well, I'm not having sex with any women right now, like, so what does that mean?
Yeah, because so many people tie your sexual orientation to your sexual activity, and those things do not always coincide.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Or they're not always, I guess I should also say they're not always conclusive, because if you are bisexual, then your sexuality is coinciding with your sex partner. It just would also coincide with a sex partner that was of a different gender,
Right, exactly. Well, and it's also that thing that, well, you're bisexual, so clearly you want to have sex with everyone and everything that you possibly could see.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that, please? How much do you guys get that? Because that's never been.
Oh my gosh. Me. Or like the threesome requests, right? There's again the sort of hypersexualization of bi women, especially who present as femme. But yeah, there's this sort of bisexuals are confused, greedy, promiscuous, can't commit, all of that kind of stuff. Threesome requests from people that it's like, I don't even know you.
You're like, you should be honored if I ever looked at you.
Like I looked you in the eye. You're welcome.
Right. Bow down, bitches.
Yes. But I think also like I feel so complicated anytime I talk about like the bi stereotypes, because like on the one hand, I think it's really important to like name those things are stereotypes. Right. And then on the other hand, I think we do this thing sometimes, at least in the bi community. I don't know, Leo, if y'all do this too, but where we kind of try to like play to respectability to earn that validity. So it's like, I'm bisexual, but like, I don't have commitment issues, and I'm not confused, and I don't like, I'm not interested in a threesome with you. But like, guess what? There are bi people who are interested in threesomes, or they are like, I don't know, have a more fluid understanding of their identity that like, maybe parts of it reflect being a phase. I wouldn't use that dismissive word, right? But we don't want to like use these terms of respectability to really lock people into a static view of themselves or a respectable view of themselves, where it's like, bi people are not promiscuous. It's like, well, they're maybe not promiscuous because they're bi, but maybe there are bi people who have multiple sexual partners, and also that's really valid. So there's a lot of different ways to be a human. And I think so often there's all this pressure to prove ourselves as counting, as being valid and good enough, that we try to like appease these cis hetero sort of standards of behavior. And that's never going to free any of us.
But I could add to, the thing is, I sometimes feel like that in queer spaces too, though, right? Like that I'm not doing either of these things right. And sometimes that's such a,
I feel that in so many intersections right now, and especially as someone who has transgressed the, boundary of gender-based privilege in our society. I don't want people to think I'm a man. Like, no tea, no shade if you are, but hashtag not me. I don't know why I'm hashtagging in conversation right now, but let's just all roll with it. I watched The Circle a lot this past week. So, but there's so many things that like I get confused in my own brain, and I'm like, do I want to do this because I'm non-binary, or do I want to do this so people know I'm non-binary? Because I'm under no obligation to perform my gender to anybody else's standards. As my crop top says, my gender, my rules. But occasionally I forget that. And then I adopt that stress onto myself. And it's a little bit of a chicken and an egg thing. Like, do I want people to see I'm queer? Yes. But do I want to have to work to people to see I'm queer? That doesn't seem emotionally healthy. And I feel like all of us in unique ways, you two in more similar ways than myself, but we're all stuck in that cycle of accepting our validity and also proving our validity, and it gets convoluted, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I think especially when we're looking, when we're trying to look to the LGBTQIA plus community for support, I think that can be a really tricky thing when, as far as I think proving that we're worthy of support.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I'm not, I mean, I don't want to say I'm intentionally not touching on, I'm acknowledging right now the massive amounts of privilege that I have moving through the world the way I do.
Correct. Same here.
I am safe. I am, you know, as respected as any other femme woman is.
You rolled your eyes so hard, Elle.
Well,
like it's, yep.
Yeah.
Just, yep.
You know, take that compliment when someone yells at you from across the street. But overwhelmingly, I exist as I would like to.
Yeah.
And so I think that then gets tricky though, when I want to come into a space where I might not be saying it quite.
No, I think I understand what you're saying, because it's almost like I have all this privilege, but I want one more. You know what I mean? But really, it's not,
you know, but it's really hard.
Right. Yeah. And you're not, I think it's so frustrating, because I could see someone, particularly for you, Lupine, and probably also for you, Elle, saying like, oh, you just want to be marginalized. Because people say that, you know, that happens all the time with white people co-opting Black culture. But the thing is, you're not co-opting anything. It's your damn culture. And people just don't see that. Right.
Yeah. And I think also, you know, there's just so much diversity of experience in the LGBTQI plus community. Like there's just so many ways to be, like, even bisexuals, like there's trans bisexuals and cis bisexuals and non-binary bisexuals, and there's, you know, ace bisexuals and allo bisexuals. Like there's so many different ways to be, right? And then of course there's all the intersections of things like disability and age and race and ethnicity and citizenship status and all of those things. And so I think that is like actually part of our strength as LGBTQI plus people is that we have all of this diversity of experiences and backgrounds. And at the same time, it's one of the reasons it's hard for us to understand each other. And sometimes we have competing or just different needs because of those experiences. And so, I think my like hope for Pride, right? Not just like for me to be included, although like that's great.
That'd be dope.
Right. That's I'm into that. But I think my hope for Pride would be that like we would live into like the best versions of our community where people don't have to assimilate in order to be celebrated, and people can bring their diverse experiences and be considered valid, and we can all band together in solidarity, and especially around those who are most oppressed among us, and really make sure that everybody has what they need, because I think we can really do that. We don't have to be like in competition with one another. We don't have to believe the sort of, I think sometimes the biphobia in our community comes from this trauma, right? From monosexual gay men and lesbians and other people in the community who aren't bisexual. Almost all of us have experienced the trauma of just living in this heterosexist, homophobic society. And so we sort of get this scarcity narrative of like, if there's not enough for me, how can I share with you? Right. Or like, there's not enough queer to go around. There's not enough resources to go around. And really what's happening is that's the dominant culture dividing us so that they can conquer us. Right. And when we band together in solidarity, and especially center the people who are most affected, then we're all stronger and we all do better. It's not like it's not like it's not pie
running
out. Yeah.
I'm just going to end the conversation now because that was glorious. See you guys later. I'm just kidding.
Oh my gosh.
But I think the intersectionality, that's the key, right? And you're exactly right. There's those systems of heterosexuality and patriarchy, and all of those things, right, are coming back into our society. Like if you look at a white cis gay male, especially in, you know, areas where maybe smaller areas, because I think areas progress ideologically at different rates. So if you look at, like, say, a small town in Western, or a small city in Western New York, their pride is much more likely to be run by cis white gay men who don't need to think about wheelchairs, or the fact that police will never protect them, or the fact that, you know, we might need tampons in all of the, you know, all of the places instead of just the ones with a dress on them, because we put dresses on bathrooms, like why? But you know, there is those dominant cultural narratives that are maladaptive, and we carry them into our own damn house. Like, why?
Yeah. Yes, we absolutely do. We do. Yeah, we internalize that stuff, you know, like it's stuff that we have been surrounded by our whole lives. And so we have to, like, you know, it's like a poison we've ingested. We have to unlearn that stuff too.
Yeah. Did you have something to say, Lupine? Because I'm almost positive I cut you off.
Oh, you're fine. The idea of limited good actually is it's an anthropological thing.
Okay.
There's a thing called Foster's theory of limited good, and it was especially prevalent among, like, you know, peasants or other oppressed classes, and yeah, it keeps people scrabbling.
That makes so much sense. I didn't know the name of that, so thank you for pointing that out.
It's a thing that you see a lot, and it's just, as long as we can, you know, stay focused on fighting each other, we can't get together, right?
Yeah.
So.
And I kind of think that there is an unholy trinity of capitalism, patriarchy, and evangelicalism.
Yep.
And they function. The crux of those systems is that forced need concept, because the way that these systems keep us under their thumb is that we need something. We need validation. We need financial stability. We need spiritual absolution, all of these things. And they only give it to us in piecemeal because they wouldn't want to bring it. They wouldn't want us to have it for real.
Yeah, I would add, like, white supremacy and colonialism that too. That kind of doesn't make it a trinity anymore, but
it's
know,
okay.
like,
we'll add on, but that's the same. Yeah, it's the same. It's like the Scooby-Doo villain where they peel off the mask. It's like, oh, it's the same shit.
Right. Yes. Like
it's always a white guy under that mask too.
It always
is.
And now I'm a white guy. What? No.
I'll also say, okay, I'm gonna tell a story really quick. This reminds me of something that you said earlier, Leo. But you know, when I was sort of first able to start to take some space in the LGBTQI plus community, right? And again, what we're kind of talking about here is taking up the right amount of space, right?
Yes.
Like, we're valid and we deserve to have space, and acknowledging our privilege means that we need to take up, like, the correct amount of space.
Correct amount of space. Yeah.
For many of us who are women, or just, you know, LGBTQI plus in general, we're often taught to make ourselves small. And so we're talking a lot about taking up space because we've been socialized not to. But then again, of course, as, like, white people, we're socialized to just suck all the air out of a room.
Take all of it.
But I was at an event, and I'm back in, this was like 2016 or 15 or something, and I met a queer woman, and we became really good friends. And I was doing that thing where I'm like, oh, you know, I'm not like that queer, or like, I don't know if I really count, or I'm like half queer or something. And she was like, you're queer, you know? And I was like, yeah, but I mean, I don't, like, look queer. And she was like, okay, well, first of all, I knew that you were queer the moment I, like, set eyes on you. But secondly, even if I didn't sort of, like, have that gaydar, bi-fi, whatever you want to call it, even if I didn't have that, you look queer because you are queer, and this is how you look. And so I was just thinking, looking at both of you, like, when we're all, I kind of wonder, like, when we're all talking about passing privilege, if, like, some people are looking at us and they're like, girl, you don't look straight. Like, you don't look straight. You don't look, none of us here, you know, like,
If someone's like, why radar is real good, they're like, why are you guys even talking about this?
I know. So I'm sure there's plenty of, like, I'm not trying to at all, like, I don't know, downplay the erasure or any of that, but
Right.
I just like look at the three of us and I'm like, I mean,
I'm wearing a crop top and booty shorts.
yes, look at us.
I know.
And of course,
What can you do?
there's like a lot of ways to like look, right? Like, again, our community is really diverse. But yeah, I just, just thought I would like name that you all look very queer to me.
That's like the best
super queer to
compliment
me.
anybody could like ever give me.
Oh, I know. Like, I love our community. I wouldn't want to, like, I don't know. If I used to pray that God would change me or change the church, and God's changing the church, but it's taking its sweet time. But now, like, if I were to pray something, I would pray the opposite. Like, if there's reincarnation, make me queerer. If that's
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Just sprinkle on a little extra,
Like the glitter. The active ingredient is obviously glitter.
Yes, absolutely. Totally.
How can I ask both
No
of you
doubt.
folks a question, because I'm genuinely curious. For me, my orientation was and it still is fight me on it, and always will be fight me on it. I don't know, this might destroy some people's ideological ideas, but I'm a lesbian. I'm fundamentally attracted to queer female people. And I think that the body that person might come in could probably vary for me. If something were to happen to Elle, please let that never happen. But I think I'm attracted to queer feminine energy, right? So for me, I always knew that. And I for a while I was like, I'm bi, but it was like a way to soften the blow. I never really thought I was bi. I knew I liked women. But how did you meet out the fact that you were feminine and you liked women? Like, was there ever a tug of war for you, or did you both? And your stories are probably different because you're different people, but how did that understanding come about in your brain for you? Don't jump at once.
Yeah, I think at first it's very confusing, and I've actually heard this is true for some trans people too. So I don't know if this is true for you, Leo, in another way, but it's kind of confusing sometimes, even now. Like, am I attracted to you, like, sexually, or do I think you have the sweetest aesthetic and I like want to?
Oh my God, that happens to me all the time.
Yeah. So I tend to like, I definitely am. Obviously, I'm attracted to some men. I'm attracted to plenty of non-binary people. I'm attracted to queer women of various presentations, including some high femmes. Probably high femmes is like, maybe the folks I'm most often attracted to. And so that's when it gets a little bit confusing, when I'm like, oh, do I just like your makeup, or like I want to kiss you? I don't know. I don't know. How about you, Lupine?
Yeah, I feel that very much. I also have borderline personality disorder.
Okay.
So that adds a whole layer of like intense onto
for sure
sometimes. So yeah, I think figuring out where that line was really interesting for me. So I actually grew up in the Unitarian Universalist community.
Okay.
So like polar opposite, right? To the level that I thought, am I just trying to be bi to be like these other girls? Like,
I love that. Like, you were in such an open community, you had to be queer to fit in.
Yeah. Like, am I pretending this?
Right.
And I didn't think I was, but I was also adolescent and super insecure, and definitely enjoyed attention that I got from people when I was walking around with my super cute girlfriend. Like, so it was really figuring out for me whether it was actually authentic or whether I was just trying to be cool because I thought people were really cool, and I still do. But
I mean, obviously. Look at you bitches.
I think too, a thing that happens that I try to push back against, and this might be like a hashtag unpopular opinion, but I'm using your
I like it,
Leo. But sometimes, and a lot of times this is coming from the bi community, and of course because of our own like hurt and trauma, I see bi people kind of slam queer baiting or bar sexuals, right? Girls who make out with other girls for attention, blah, blah, blah. And personally, I get why people are frustrated with folks who do that. And isn't that how a lot of us figure out that maybe we are into this too?
Yep.
And so I just try to like have a lot of grace around stuff that might be perceived as like queer baiting, or I don't know, I kissed a girl and I liked it,
Right.
Cancun spring break type stuff, because I'm like, maybe it is just people trying to sort of like exploit us. And maybe it's actually really hard to figure all of this out. And that is the way that many of us start to wonder about ourselves and go into some deeper exploration. So I don't know, just a thought.
I mean, I understand why, like, the thing is that often that can be so exhausting sometimes, like, I mean, being willing to do all that heavy lifting all the time is so tiring. And so like, yeah, I feel exactly the same way. Like, I get why people are like, I really don't appreciate this because it makes my existence harder. And I also get people saying, well, but like, maybe I'm figuring my existence out and I feel like I can do this because spring break.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's so true. I used to be so frustrated by that. First of all, I kissed a girl and I liked it. Came out the same summer I did. Boom, that's the whole joke. It's one of my favorite to say, but I used to get so frustrated by it because I felt like people were trivializing something that I couldn't choose. I couldn't opt out of.
Yeah.
There was no opt-out button for me. And I knew that. And I came to a very clear understanding of that after my third exorcism. And, they were either shitty exorcisms or they were so good, I'm a boy now. Jury's still out. But I had a moment where I was in the mall, literally right after it happened. And I was picking up my friend's paycheck and this beautiful woman walked by and I just followed her with my gaze. And I had a revelation, like, I didn't choose that. That was a subconscious thing, right? And so it felt to me, I felt trapped in the isolation that it was to come out from my context. Because for me, I lost, I had to stand to risk to lose my family, my friends, my college education, my job prospects, and my sense of vocation. You know what I mean? And so I felt frustrated that people would trivialize it. But in that, I was being insensitive. Now I'm giving myself grace because I was a shit show at the time. But if I carried that thought forward, it would have been maladaptive because it would be limiting other people's process. And I have rights as a person, but I never have a right to infringe on someone else's.
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense. I also, when that song first came out, was like super frustrated with it because I'm like, we're a real thing,
Yeah.
So this has been my own sort of like evolution towards like, there was a time when I was that, girl on spring break. And then there was the time when I was like proving that I wasn't.
Right.
And now maybe I can just try to be understanding of people's self-discovery and we'll see. But it's also okay to have boundaries, right? Like if you're like, if I definitely think it's messed up that there's like some people in our community who are like, I don't date bisexuals, like period. Right. But I think it is okay to have boundaries about like the nature of your relationship. If you're like, hey, I'm in a place in my life where like, for example, I'm not going to be pushed back in the closet because I want to be out and I need to be with someone who's in a similar place in life. Like that is a different kind of boundary, right? So, and that's, not just sort of arbitrarily applied to bi people. It's like all kinds of people.
Right.
And so I think we can have like grace for where people are at and also care for ourselves and like our own needs. But obviously that's a balancing act. It's tricky.
It is. It's this all the time, it very much is. And we have to have grace. That's actually, I can't use my mirrored camera, but I got the word grace tattooed on my forehead for so many reasons. And not the least of which being to be nice to myself while I'm in process, but also to remind myself that everybody else is simultaneously in process. Right.
Yes.
And we have to remember that. And I mean, if you're talking people that are in the queer community, and if you want to double that, people that are female bodied and have been subject to the patriarchy, and if you want to triple that and talk about people who are neurodivergent, and quadruple that and talk about people who have co-occurring mental health issues, like there are all of these things that are happening, and I might be aware of one or none of them.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep. Totally.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, I think that that's why what you're doing here with conversations is so useful
Mhm.
Yeah.
as well, because I know I've learned a ton from people who have different experiences than I do,
Mhm.
and and I appreciate that, especially during times when maybe they don't want to do a lot of lifting,
Mhm.
right? And maybe then I can pick up some lifting.
Mhm.
And so I feel like, the more we have these conversations, the more we get to put our truths out there into the world and
Mhm.
talk about them, but
Yeah.
also the more we get to support each other
Yes.
in times that we need it, and both of
Yeah.
those are just so strong, and
Yes.
it's so remarkable that just conversations can do that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and that's the whole thing. Like, we need, not to like try to force everything back to like, Leo, your project's so cool. But we need to understand that intersectionality and diversity are a strength, and we need to fight to support that. Because like nature itself is non-binary, God is non-binary, the concept of divinity is non-binary. It is fundamentally, you know, not exclusional, it is inclusional of all sorts of diversity, and we need to find ways to champion that and to support each other, and especially as queer people. And we have to, I don't know why I said and there, that was stupid, way to ruin a good soundbite. But especially as queer people, we have to come together, because people will try to force us into a scarcity mindset, but our community is big enough for all of us. And
Yes.
so we've got to remember that our community is big enough for all of us. I have to go hang out with my like super cute wife now.
Yes.
So the other Elle in my life,
Yes.
if you will.
Yes.
But I would love if
Oh
you both
my.
could do me two favors, right? I would love each of you to let me know if people only remembered one thing from this whole conversation, what you would want them to remember. And that you get, Lupine, you got a panic look on your face. So Elle, you might have to go first.
Okay.
But if there's one thing you want people to remember about this conversation or about what you brought to the table, drop that. And then also after that, we'll have you drop your social media handles. So Elle, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Yeah. I think if there was one thing or like a summary of
Mhm.
things to remember, is maybe it's good not to make assumptions about people.
Mhm.
And the more that we can be in solidarity with one another, the more liberation there is for all of us. And we're all sort of learning who we are in this space and learning how to take up the appropriate amount of space.
Mhm.
And so, bi people, you're very valid. LGBTQI plus people of all shapes, sizes, colors, stripes, you're also very valid. And I'm grateful. Again, I would always, if I was reincarnated, I would always choose to come back queer because
Yes.
of all of you.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. So when I had, so I have two kids, um, and when I was adjusting my older child to the idea that there was going to be this new person around, someone told me to get a candle and light it. And what we did was we lit the candle and we said, okay, so here I had all my love, and then I met daddy and I had another candle
Mhm.
and I gave all my love to daddy because love is magic like that.
Mhm.
Right. And then we got another candle and we said, and then we had you and we gave all our love to you because love is magic like that.
Mm.
And it doesn't matter how many candles we have, we can light them and light them and light them and light them.
Oh my God, it's
Um,
glorious. I've never heard that
it
before, and I
it
love
was a really yeah, it was really nice. And so I think doing everything we can to keep our own candles lit,
it. Mhm.
right? But remembering that we can always light them from each
Yes.
other's, as
Yeah.
long as we don't blow each other's out, I guess.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah.
I think something that came to me, and I wasn't planning to do the wrap up because I don't usually do that. I don't usually do that question. I usually leave it to my guest. But I think that practically speaking is that you always have to find the intersections. Because if you can find the intersection with somebody, it's much harder to other. And so I think that we need to be, when we're talking about queer as an orientation, we need to be also understanding that queer can be an orientation to the world, right? And the process of queering is a thing that we need to be doing regularly. And that is finding the intersection so that we cannot be divided, so that we cannot allow room for hate to fester. So finding the intersection, I think, is a glorious thing. And I think as bisexual people, you live in an intersection of sorts. So not that all of us don't, but it's definitely an intersection that in no way invalidates who you are. So would you guys mind going ahead and just dropping ways to contact you on social media?
Sure. You can go to my website, which is elledowd.com. And on my website, there's also a link to buy my book that mentions queerness, but is actually more about my experiences during the Ferguson uprising and my own personal transformation. It's called Baptized in Tear Gas. So you can find that on elledowd.com. You can also find me on Facebook, facebook.com/Elle Dowd Ministry, or on TikTok at Elle Dowd Ministry, or you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat at How Now Brown Dowd. My name before I was married was Brown, so Brown Dowd. Yes. How Now Brown Dowd.
And also keep in your calendars, folks, Elle will be back on August 2nd to discuss Baptized in Tear Gas. I can't wait to read it and let's have a kiki.
Yes.
My socials are just private.
All right. Really, that's fair.
Into lockdown.
So if people want to contact you, would it be fair for them to message me and then I could forward you?
Sure. I mean, okay. I'm really not that interesting, but if you want to.
I think you have much more to bring to the world than you realize. Well, thank you so much, friends, for being on here. It brought queer to my joy little heart. Oh, just killing sound bites left and right. It brought joy to my queer little heart to spend time discussing the intersections of this queer existence with you. I want to say a very happy Pride to each and every one of you that is watching. I want to say a happy Pride to you, Lupine, and to you, Elle, and thank everybody, watchers and participants alike, for your time. We'll be back here in Queer next week for some more Pride conversations and intersectional conversations about life. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
This has been the Conversations Podcast. Thank you so much for joining. If you have any questions or comments, or just want to get involved, feel free to join the conversation on social media. You can find us at Conversations Official on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And please don't forget to rate, follow, and share this podcast. We're available on Anchor, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for joining the conversation.